Hi, so I am Jocelyn Vance, and today I'm excited to share with you about my math journey and how I discovered how to make math more enjoyable for my kids in homeschooling them. So I started homeschooling my kids um, about 11 years ago. And about 11 years ago, I pulled my kids out of public school because I just had this really strong impression that I needed to homeschool them. And I really wanted to spend more time with them and have fun with them and enjoy our time together. And I just felt like the years that were passing by so quickly, and I just really wanted to have a good time with my kids. And I read books about education and about homeschooling. And the more I read, the more I realized that was the life that I really wanted. But when it came time to actually implement the things that I had read and learned as I studied about homeschooling and education, I realized that it was a lot harder than I thought, and especially when it came to math, because I had thought when I pulled my oldest out of public school, he was in third grade, so he was going into fourth grade, and I had thought I'm just going to continue, what the public school is teaching, and I'm going to give him a fourth grade curriculum, and he's just going to catch right up to math and be fine. And little did I know that it was a lot longer and more difficult of a process than just giving him a book and telling him to learn math or figuring out we're just going to learn math somehow. Especially for me, because I didn't feel that I was very knowledgeable with math, and I didn't feel like I had had a good education as far as math goes. And so it was a lot more complicated than I had thought. And so I discovered a book by Oliver DeMille called Atomic 7% Education. And in this book, he talks about leading by example and how we can show our kids the way and help our kids um, learn to love learning. And we can help our kids learn that they can learn anything if they have a desire to learn it. But it starts with us as mothers and parents to lead by example. And so I had a book recommended to me um, to read. It was called A Beginner's Guide to Constructing the Universe. And in this book, it talked about how numbers were all around us, and numbers were in art and throughout history. And there are symbols that represent so many different things and so many patterns in nature. The way that God created the world, he created it using numbers. I started to see a bigger picture of what numbers really were. And then another book that was recommended to me to read, and I read this with my kids, was Mathematicians Are People Too. And so in this book, I started to really understand who these people were. In school, in public school, which I had gone to when I was growing up, I had learned about, the Pythagorean theorem or about all these different things that you learn about in school. But I had never realized that these theories and these ideas had been created and thought about by somebody through in history. And we are teaching these to our kids, but I had never heard their stories. And so when I read in some of the stories from Mathematicians Are People Too, like the story of Pythagoras and how he came up with the Pythagorean theorem by he lived in ancient Egypt, and he was trying to figure out how to measure a pyramid. And so he started coming up with a way that you can measure triangles without having to get up there onto a pyramid and use a measuring tape and measure it. But he came up with a way to measure triangles. And then reading the story of Archimedes and how he discovered that um, how to measure mass and how to measure a circle. He had before him, they had thought that you measure circles just by drawing a straight line from one end to another. But he came up with this whole idea of pi. And so just all these different things I had never thought about. And I just started realizing, wow, these are really interesting concepts, and they really are um, interesting and important and relevant to our lives. And so it started to kind of light a fire in me, and I was excited to get my kids to fall in love with math. And so I'm going to share with you a little bit about some of the things that I discovered and I learned as I was trying to get my kids excited about math, and that as I've gotten more excited about math in my life. I'm still not going to be a mathematician or an engineer or anything like that, but I do love and enjoy it, and I find it very fascinating now. So I came across an experiment, and this experiment is shared in Marlene Peterson's Mother's University on the librariesofhope.com. She has a Mother's University where she has a section on math. And in this section, she shares this experiment. I had read this experiment many years ago, but I discovered later on Marlene Peterson's Libraries of Hope, and I thought it was really interesting. And I think it's really important for moms to read this because it really lit a fire in me and helped me see that math education, especially in the elementary years, could be very different from what I had thought it needed to be. And so Louis P. Benezet lived in the 1930s, and in 1939, he was a New York City school teacher. And in his school district, he had been teaching a lot of immigrants from other countries, and these children barely spoke English. And he started realizing that there might be something more important for them to learn other than math. You know, math, he knew math was important for them, but maybe they needed to learn it in a different order. And maybe the language, learning the language needed to be first before the math. And so this is what he said. He said, I feel that it is all nonsense to take 8 years to get children through the ordinary arithmetic assignment of the elementary schools. What possible needs has a 10-year-old child for knowledge of long division? The whole subject of arithmetic could be postponed until the 7th year of school, and it could be mastered in 2 years' study by any normal child. So he had this idea. He said, I want to try this experiment and see if these children, if I could really postpone everything that they needed to learn in elementary school until the 7th year, till 7th grade. And so he proposed this to the parents, and they agreed. And I think they were a lower income, in a lower income community. And so I think it was a little bit easier for them to agree with this, but they agreed to do it, to try this out. And so he went along with this idea. And he said, in the fall of 1929, I made up my mind to try the experiment of abandoning all formal instruction in arithmetic below the 7th grade and concentrating on teaching the children to read, to reason, and to recite, my new 3 R's. And by reciting, I did not mean giving back verbatim the words of the teacher or of the textbook. I meant speaking the English language. And so in his experiment, if you go and read it, you'll see that the kids actually were having so much fun in elementary school. And it's not that they didn't learn math, but they learned it informally. So not through worksheets or doing sums, but they learned it through actually experiencing it by talking about distances and by doing so many different things together, just talking about it, having conversations. And then in the 7th grade, he went and got the kids caught up with math, and he tested them. They wanted to see if these kids really did understand math. And when he tested them, and they had a whiteboard out, and they had some of the kids from a very elite private school in this area tested compared to these other kids that had delayed their math instruction. And they found that the kids that had delayed their math instruction and had been caught up actually understood math better. Sorry, I'm trying to get my cord. They actually understood math better than the kids that were in the most elite private school. And so this was just an experiment that he did, and it didn't carry on for too long, because this was not something that the school district wanted to adopt, but it did make a big impact on me and on the idea of what math education and math instruction could look like. And so after reading this experiment, the way that it impacted me was that I just thought, okay, math could actually be joyful and exciting, and it doesn't need to be this process of drilling our kids with math facts and making sure they complete the lesson and making sure that they're not. I thought, okay, maybe they don't need to feel like they're behind if they don't understand a concept, and if it takes them a little while to understand a concept, because really they could actually learn everything they needed to learn in 2 years' time when their brains are more mature and fully developed. And so it just kind of opened up a whole new door for me. And then in the Mother's University of Marlene Peterson, she also shares that an article called, and this isn't under the math section, it's under imagination, but there's an article by Judy Willis entitled The Neuroscience Behind Stress and Learning. And this article was really interesting, and I will share this on my notes below today. So if you are missing it, if you want to read this article and dig a little deeper, because I think it's really interesting, I'd highly recommend you read it. But in this article, Judy Willis explains a study done on children's brains when they're not learning joyfully. And I'm going to share with you what she found. She said the amygdala is part of a limbic system in the temporal lobe. It was first believed to function as a brain center for responding primarily to anxiety and fear. When the amygdala is in the state of stress-induced or overactivation, new sensory information cannot pass through it to access the memory and association circuits. So I thought this was really interesting because this made me think that when in the brain scans that they did on the children's brains, the part of the brain that normally lights up, the amygdala, when it's under stress, actually lights up when they are in a stressful learning environment. What is now evident on brain scans during times of stress is objective physical evidence of this effective filter. With such evidence-based research, the effective filter theories cannot be disparaged as feel-good education or an excuse to coddle students. If students are stressed out, the information cannot get in. This is a matter of science. And so this article just gave me all the more reason to make learning and in our home, and especially math, but any subject, it gave me all the more desire and reason to make it a joyful journey and not something that is going to cause stress to my kids. And so today I'm going to share with you how I discovered how to make math more joyful and exciting and not as stressful. It says, hence, if we're really able to help our kids learn math, we need to make it relevant to their lives and fun. How do we make math relevant to our lives? Here's some ideas. First, money. Kids can learn money from earning money, creating a business, going shopping, and playing games with money. They can also learn measurements. Kids can learn measurements by measuring their height, sewing, building projects, travel, and talking about distances. Time. Kids can learn time by having clocks around their house, asking them to check the time, giving them a watch. We can make math part of our family culture. The awesome thing about home education and homeschooling is that math doesn't really need to be a separate subject from our family life. We can actually teach our kids a lot by just living life together as a family. You can learn a lot by cooking together. Kids can learn fractions, measurements, and numbers. By shopping together, kids can learn money, addition, subtraction, multiplication, decimals, and percents. The possibilities are endless, and so I love that as part of homeschooling and home education, we can make it part of our family culture. And that's one of the reasons that I love homeschooling so much. Another idea and another thing that we have incorporated in our home is called game schooling. And today I'm going to share with you, and the link below, I'm going to share with you a lot of articles, but also a spreadsheet that was compiled by a friend of mine. And it shares a whole bunch of different games and the concepts that they cover, and teaching the different concepts that kids need to learn in math in the elementary years. What kind of math is learned in the elementary years and how can it be learned through games? Well, I kind of compiled a list, and this isn't in any particular order, but the math that needs to be learned in elementary years is kind of like, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 basic things that they need to learn and children need to learn in the elementary years. The first is number sense, pattern recognition, place value, estimation, colors, shapes, skip counting. These can be learned through games like through a hundreds board, a game called Sum Swamp, Clumsy Thief, Pattern Blocks, Hi-Ho Cherry-O, Candyland, and Uno. I've also compiled an Amazon list of math fun games where you can find a lot of these games that I put on there. They can learn addition and subtraction through a game called Sum Swamp. I love this game because it's you get little pawns and you get 3 dice, and there's 2 die with numbers on them, and then there's one with a plus or minus sign, and you roll the die, and then if it says minus, you go backwards, and if it says plus, you go forward. And I think this is a perfect way to teach kids addition and subtraction. Another game that teaches addition is called Check the Fridge. IC10 teaches them how to add up to 10 and they draw numbers, and the numbers add up to 10, they get to keep the numbers. Another one is called Clumsy Thief. Shut the box, cover your assets. And I have these all linked below and in my Amazon list where you can see them and read more about these games. I just wanted to give you an idea of all these different games and how they can teach all these concepts that you really need to learn in the elementary years. And something that I do with my kids is I kind of gauge where my kids are at, especially in the elementary years. And I know, okay, they need to learn addition and subtraction this year. And I purchase these games that teach these concepts, and we incorporate them throughout our days and throughout our weeks. And they've learned a lot of the concepts that they need to learn just by playing lots of games together as a family. And so I love that. I've loved that they can learn all these concepts from the elementary years and by playing games. Another thing that really helps in teaching kids, especially in the elementary years, is simple tools instead of workbooks. Instead of like a curriculum, we focus on workbooks that teach the concepts. So Usborne, which now is owned by Paper Pie, and has these activity books that I really love. They have them focused on addition and subtraction, times tables, fractions and decimals. And so when my kids are working through these books, I purchase the games and these books, and we focus on learning these concepts. And it doesn't mean that they never practice them again, but they build on each other. And so addition and subtraction, once they know that, then they can start learning times tables. Once they know that, they can start learning fractions and decimals and division. And other ones are these learning wrap-ups. They're a really fun way to practice math facts. And you can't just credit logic and reasoning and critical thinking that can be learned through so many games. Like this game called Gravity Maze is a fun logic game where kids have to learn and think about, strategize and come up with ways of how they can strategize. And so I love games like that. The hundreds board we've used a lot in our home for practicing skip counting. I have my kids just look at the board, and they love practicing counting to 100. Then I tell them to look at the board and count by fives. And we also use it when we're doing the workbooks. They use it to help them doing addition and subtraction by looking at the numbers on the hundreds board. So it's a really useful tool, and I think it's a really necessary tool in every home. Another thing that we really love to use in our home to help math be more exciting and relevant is our books that have been written with stories that make math fun. I mentioned already, Mathematicians Are People Too. There's also books called the Circumference series. There's a lot of these books, which they make it a fun story about knights and how they use these different ideas such as pi to measure the round table or different things there. It's a whole series of stories, and they make math very fun and exciting. We also love Bedtime Math, a series that has questions, just a simple kind of word problem, and the kids can answer it at night before they go to bed or during the day. And they're fun and easy, and the kids really have fun answering these questions and thinking through these problems. And they're adjusted for beginning, intermediate, and more advanced kids. And so really math is the process of getting kids to think and getting your brains to, I tell my kids it's a brain workout. And so it's actually really fun. And I've discovered that with my kids, and they've really discovered that math can be fun. There's also another talk, which I'm going to share it below. I'm not going to share it right now. This is also provided in the Math and the Mother's University under the math section from Marlene Peterson. But this is a TED talk given by John Bennett. And he talks about, this is another thought to just think about and consider. And I don't think we need to get rid of all math instruction in the elementary years. I believe it's important. But he says the most important thing that math can do for what we really should be focusing on for our kids in the elementary years is logic and critical thinking is a huge component of math skills. And this can be done in a lot of ways, and it doesn't have to only be done through a curriculum or a workbook. It can be done through playing puzzles, games like I suggested, and so many different things. Puzzles and games like chess and teach logical think and critical thinking. Like I said, I'm providing a link to my Amazon list for math fun games below. And I try to compile all the games and all the different things. You don't need to purchase everything on that list, but I thought it would be a fun way for everyone to see what kinds of things they can use in their homes to make math fun. Another thing that I have loved using in our homeschool is dice. On my Amazon fun list, you can buy a package of 100 die, and I have a link to below also for some games that I created and that we use in our home. We found a lot of these games from mathinspirations.com, where she compiled a list of games that teach different concepts like place value, addition, multiplication, numbers using dice. And my kids really love doing these games. So these dice are really important. And I think they have been a huge part in making math fun in our home. Don't discredit rest and play. So a lot of times we think, oh, our kids need to be doing math every day. And if they don't get it every day, then they're just going to be behind and fail. But there's actually been a lot of studies and research done on the idea of rest and play for kids in childhood. And something that really just dawned on me as I was reading a book called 10x is better than 2x was an idea that we actually learn a lot, and our brains actually learn a lot when we're resting and when they're playing. Our big ideas come when we're in a state of rest, not in front of a computer or even in front of a screen or a workbook. So sometimes our kids and my kids would struggle with a concept, and I would just say, okay, we're going to take a break and then come back to it. And usually after we took a break and came back to that concept, they would get it because the process of just them resting and letting it sit for a little while just gave them a chance to really ponder and stir on this concept, and they would get it later on. And so I loved watching that process and watching that it's something that sometimes with, especially math instruction, is something that we can really see in our kids and measure. And so I love watching that as kids get these aha moments and realize, okay, I get it now. It doesn't come always when they're on the time that we as a parent might want them to get it. And we can get easily frustrated. And so we need to be willing to let it go for a little bit and let them think about it for a little while. Julie Bogart, she wrote a book called The Brave Learner. She said, when the tears come, the lesson is over. And she talks a lot about homeschooling her own children and how she just made this a motto for herself, that when the tears come, the lesson is over. So instead of trying to push through a lesson, just if your kids are crying, then take a break and say, okay, we'll try this again tomorrow. And it's important to remember that with our kids, is just let them take a break and come back to it the next day. We need to not, Charlotte Mason advocated short lessons for younger children. She said 15 or 20 minutes at the most. These short lessons are part of training children in the habit of attention. Children can get a lot accomplished in 15 minutes of complete attention. So can adults. As children grow older, the lesson time should lengthen to 30 or 45 minutes. And so I loved that. That's studying a little bit of Charlotte Mason. You'll realize that she really did emphasize the idea of having short lessons because and shorter lessons really allows children to not get bored or tired of a subject, but they allows them to come back the next day more excited to get back to the lesson. And so something that we can do in our homes, and I've done, is just set a timer and just say, okay, we're only going to do this for 15 minutes and then it's going to be over. And when you do this, it really allows kids to say, okay, I'm just going to do this for 15 minutes and then do it again tomorrow. And it doesn't make it such a tedious and hard task when they know it's really going to be a short lesson for the day. The last thing is the old Finnish proverb that says, that which is not learned with joy will be easily forgotten. And I love this idea. In Finland, the schools are actually some of the top schools in the world. And they really do believe this, that children need to learn things with joy. And I think it's true. And I've seen that in my own home. When kids are enjoying a subject, especially when it comes to math, then they are excited to learn about it and they want to learn more. And they can't wait to get to the next level and learn the next new concept. I just want to encourage you to make math a joyful part of your homeschool and check out some of these resources that I provided below. I'm going to provide them all on the link below. I have a copy of all the talks and the articles and a link to the Mothers University math section and games that you can play for with your kids. And I hope that math can be an exciting part of your homeschool journey. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. My email is provided in the article and the link below, but it's jvkids5@gmail.com. And you can also follow us and message me on Instagram at ourinspiredfamilylife.com. So good luck with your math journey, and I hope you find joy in learning math.